Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about 3 reverb hacks to get your vocal to set perfectly in a mix. And by the way, stick around to the end because I'm also going to be revealing a mixing ninja trick that most audio schools won't teach you. Let's go. If you listen to any professionally made song and you focus in on the vocals, in most cases you can hear how present they are and how they cut through the mix with clarity. The vocal is often and nearly always the most important element in a track. The presence that you hear in a professional vocal actually helps the listener to understand the lyrics and connect with the song on a different level. Now, reverb is a common technique for affecting vocals, but it can also cause problems and sometimes even prevent the necessary vocal clarity that you're looking for. So let's discuss some ways to apply reverb to vocals in a way that allows them to still cut through the mix. Reverb hack number 1, using a reverb bus. Now, when I began producing music, I often approached reverb as if it were just an effect applied to a sound, similar to the way that you would use processors like compressors or distortion. However, I quickly learned that with reverb, you're essentially adding another signal into your mix, and it's almost like if you added another instrument. Therefore, sometimes it's actually better to treat reverb as its own element, and by creating a bus to send that reverb to, it gives you the ability to process and affect it as a separate source, essentially. Chances are that you already use sends for adding reverb, but doing so is especially important when working with vocals. For those of you that don't, let me break it down real quick in these simple terms. The vocal in your track should clearly cut through its associated reverb, which is much more difficult to achieve when using reverb as an inserted effect on a track. With only one channel for both the dry vocal and the reverbed vocal, we cannot easily affect each of those elements so that they play well together. So therefore, using a send for reverb actually allows you to treat the reverb signal as its own distinct element in the mix. With the option to process the dry vocal and the reverbed vocal independently, now the two can more easily coexist without causing you to sacrifice vocal clarity. So for demonstration purposes, I'm looping a small portion of a densely populated mix so that we can hear the lead vocal and whether it pokes through this mix or not in an area of the mix that's really got a lot going on. So for this first example, I'm just going to let you listen to the vocal as it sets dry, no plugins enabled whatsoever.
Through the fire, through the flame.
So I chose a medium plate reverb for this particular instance, which is usually a great option for a lead vocal. Now the reverb itself sounds great, but it also tends to mask the dry vocal, which reduces clarity, as we spoke of earlier. So take a listen now with the reverb enabled.
Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger.
Now, although with the plugin enabled, it definitely does create a little bit more space for the vocal and allows it to stand out a little bit more. However, at least to my ears, I'm still hearing a lot of masking in those low-mid regions, which is very vital to a vocal. And so let's go ahead and remove this reverb plugin from the effects bin, and let's create a send so that we can send the reverb, this dry signal, to the reverb buses. All right, so for the next audio clip example, I've removed the reverb plugin off of the track FX bin itself, and now I've created 3 buses, one for a plate, one for a medium room, and one for a hall. On each of these buses, I have the reverb plugin's wet knob turned all the way up to 100%, so now I'm only sending a dry signal to a completely wet plugin. This allows me to keep all of my dry signal on the vocal channel itself, with all of my wet signal coming from those bus channels. So in case you missed it, this is reverb hack number 2, create multiple reverb buses. Now, I'm not saying that this is a hard and fast rule and that you have to do this on every single mix. In fact, you don't even have to use it this way at all. If you only want to create one reverb bus, that's fine too. What I'm showing you is just my method of doing this. While this sounds very similar to the previous example, the dry vocal now stays at a consistent level, and I have the ability to bring in as much reverb signal as I'd like. With a reverb send, the dry signal becomes quieter as you add wet signal into it, so this method is actually much more easy to deal with, in my personal opinion. All right, so let's listen to the vocal by itself, nothing enabled once again, just for reference purposes.
Through the fire, through the flame.
All right, so to showcase the power of Reverb Pack number 2, I'm now going to enable the sends, and we're going to listen to the Reverb Pack soloed once again.
Through the fire, through the flame.
So as you were able to hear, there was a lot more intelligibility in the lead vocal, and also the frequency masking that was happening in those lower regions is gone. Okay, so using the same example of this reverb with the sends enabled, let's go ahead and play this in context with the mix. I'm going to start it out with the sends being disabled, and then we're going to enable them on the next go around of the vocal so that you have a good reference point to start from. Let's take a listen.
Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain.
All right, now let's listen to that same portion of music with the sends enabled.
Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain.
All right, now real quickly, I'm going to A-B them back to back so that you get to hear the dramatic difference that's being made.
Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear, especially if you had a good set of headphones on, that not only was the spatiality preserved of the lead vocal, but there was also clarity that was added back into it, and it allowed it to sit on top of the mix just a little more. All right, guys, that brings us to Reverb Pack number 3, which is to EQ your reverb buses. So as you can see before us here, I've got my reverb short room, my reverb long haul, and my medium plate here, and I've got them EQ'd sort of per se to where they would fit better within this mix. And that is by cutting off a lot of that low end and attenuating some of the highs. You'll also notice that in the 400 hertz range, which is a typical range where a lot of the low end likes to build up, I've also dipped that out. However, to make this vocal pop through even more, I can cut out some of those regions where it might be fighting with those vocal frequencies, like around the 2000 to 3000 kilohertz range. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do a before and after, and you can listen to the difference.
Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain. Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain. Through the fire, through the flame, you're making us stronger. No, it's not in vain.
All right, guys, so I realized that was very subtle. It's one of those things that you really need headphones on to hear. But all of these small changes over time is what's really going to stack up to some big wins at the end of your mix. Okay, so I realized that due to the subtlety and nature of that last move that we just made in context with the mix, it was probably a little bit hard for you to pick up on considering you're not really familiar with this mix itself. So I'm going to go ahead and solo the vocal, and we're going to do those same changes that we just made with the vocal being soloed so that you can actually hear an accurate representation of exactly what this is doing to the lead vocal. Let's take a listen. So this is without the EQ moves being in place.
Through the fire,
and with,
through the flame.
without,
You're making us stronger.
and with.
No, it's not in vain.
So yes, although this was a very subtle change in context with the mix, when we solo the vocal out, you can definitely hear a dramatic difference in the tonality of that lead vocal, and I believe that's what helped it to poke out of the mix just a little bit better. Okay guys, and as promised, here's the mixing ninja trick that most audio schools won't tell you. Reverb in itself is much like delay in the sense that it is a time-based effect. So by making subtle adjustments into the timing of your reverb, you can actually come out with some really good results. All right, guys, so for the sake of brevity, I don't have time to go in depth into the equations that are used in order to get your reverb to play well with your vocal time-wise. However, what I have done is I've simplified the process for you. So you can simply go over to homestudiosimplified.com. There's a small tab right here called the Reverb/Delay Calculator. By clicking on this, you can actually go and enter in your BPMs, which ours are 75 beats per minute. Hit the enter button or calculate, and it will give you the equation's answer right here. So 800 milliseconds is the ideal timing for my reverb to be on in order to set well with my vocal. Now, if you want to learn more about the equation and how to use this calculator, you can simply scroll down on the screen and read more about it too. So now, based off of a mix that's 75 BPMs, I know that 800 milliseconds is my ideal timing for my reverb to play well with my vocal. I'm now going to take that number and apply it to my pre-existing reverbs here and vary it up in different ways. For instance, on this short room, I'm actually going to do half of that at 400 milliseconds. And on my long haul, I'm going to do twice that much at 1.6 seconds. And then on my medium plate, I'm actually going to do that 800 milliseconds that we found on the website. So on each one of these tracks, I've copied the top plugin instance down below it, and I've made those changes on these bottom plugins so that I can enable and disable them in context with the mix, and you can hear the dramatic difference that's being made. So for reference sake, let's listen to the mix now as it was the way before we left it, and then I'm going to enable the new plugins with this time shift that's been enabled, and we'll see how that makes a difference.
Through the fire, through the flame, through the fire, through the flame.
Okay, so with the lead vocal being soloed, at least what I can hear to my ears is it sounds like the reverb is actually supporting the vocal now instead of like trailing behind it or trying to get in front of it. So now it seems like it's going to actually help to push it on the top of the mix. Let's listen to this in context with the mix and see if that actually is the case. All right, so here's the before.
Through the fire, through the flame.
And this is after we have the reverb mixing ninja trick enabled. Let's take a listen.
Through the fire, through the flame. You're making us stronger.
So if you were listening on a set of headphones, I'm sure you were able to hear that now the lead vocal seems to pop out of the mix just a little more, and no longer are the vocals being smeared by the reverb. Those frequencies that once were hidden are now actually up underneath the vocal, upholding it, uplifting it like they were intended to be in the first place. Oftentimes in audio engineering, one of the best ways to hear a definitive change from one source to another is to actually remove all visual elements from the picture. And so I've done that now, and as you can see, we're looking at just a completely blank screen. We're going to listen to the before and the after, the before being the completely dry, untouched vocal that we started with in the first portion of this video, and the after being after we've applied the 3 reverb hacks as well as the mixing ninja trick that most audio schools won't tell you. So let's go ahead and take a listen now without any visual aids whatsoever and let your ears do the speaking.
Through the fire, through the flame. Through the fire, through the flame. Through the fire, through the flame.
So just like with anything else in life, knowing about something and actually applying something are two totally different things. So take these 3 reverb hacks and this mixing ninja trick that I've given you today and begin to go and apply it to your mixes, and then comment in the comment section below this video whether it helped or whether it hindered. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to see more like this, then hit that subscribe button, and also make sure to click the bell icon so that every time I upload a new video, you'll be the first to know. Remember, this channel exists to simplify the complexities of the home studio and to help you make professional sounding music in a less than professional space. We can dream alone, we can even create alone, but together we can achieve so much more.